Hi, this is Akshay, and in this video I'll be showing you how to create a load balancing setup using HAProxy and run Drupal with Nginx. You will eventually reach or exceed the maximum amount of visitors your web server can handle at once. This is when load balancing will become critical. Load balancing will increase the reliability of your website by spreading the load across multiple servers, so if one goes down, no worries, the other servers will handle the requests. So let's go ahead and take a look at this diagram I made. Load balancing is comprised of front-end and back-end servers. Front-end servers are the servers which the users can connect to, while the back-end servers are the servers which actually run PHP, Nginx, and in this example, we'll be running Drupal. We are going to have one front-end server named Balancer. This will be our load balancing server. The back-end servers are going to be Web1 and Web2, which will run Drupal. The Drupal directories between these servers needs to be synchronized, so whether the user's request is forwarded to Web1 or Web2, they will still be sent the same content. So if we install a new module or upload an image on one server, it should show up on the other server as well. Lastly, we will have one database server named DB, which will be running a MySQL server. The users can only connect to the balancer because it will be the only one given a public IP address. On the other hand, all the servers will be given a private IP address and will be able to connect to each other through a private network. So no one can access Web1, Web2, or DB directly. They will first have to go through the balancer. So for example, if this blue user connects to balancer, the server will use an algorithm to forward his request to a web server. The web server will then take that request, access the database, and send back the content to balancer, which will then finally get sent to the blue user. This is known as a reverse proxy, because the blue user knows he is connecting to balancer, but he has no idea from which web server, Web1 or Web2, the content was sent from. So now that we know how it works, let's go ahead and set it up. In production, you would use real physical servers. However, in this example, I'll be using virtual machines to emulate this setup, so I'll be using a tool called Vagrant, and Vagrant allows you to easily create virtual machines. You will also need to have VirtualBox installed to assist Vagrant in emulating these virtual machines. Once you have installed Vagrant and VirtualBox, you can go ahead and open up a command prompt, and I'm going to set up my Vagrant environment in users/my/user/documents/Vagrant. So in the Vagrant folder, I'm going to create another directory called Drupal. Now let's go ahead and go into this Drupal environment, and it's basically a folder. There shouldn't be anything in here. Okay, so now we want to set up Vagrant. So before setting up Vagrant, we need to add the operating system that we're going to use and get the box from it. So I'm going to be using Ubuntu 14.04. So to add 14.04, go ahead and go Vagrant box, because we want to add the pre-configured box, and let's add its name, which is Ubuntu/trusty32. So this will get the 32-bit version of Ubuntu 14.04. Now, I already have it installed, but if you don't, which you may not have it installed, it'll probably take some time because it has to download the whole operating system. So just wait for that to happen. And there we go, it says that I already have it installed, but you should probably get a loading output since yours will be downloading. So now once you have this box added, we can go ahead and initialize our Vagrant environment. So to do that, go ahead and type Vagrant init, and we want to type in what default operating system we want to use. So in this case, Ubuntu/trusty32, and we can also give it the flag that we want it to be minimal, so it doesn't have all the extra comments. But if you're new, you can use this, but since we'll be setting it up in this video, I'll be using minimal. So there you go, a Vagrant file has been created and placed in this directory. So we can go ahead and find that in the Drupal directory right here. So in Documents, Vagrant, Drupal, there's a Vagrant file right here. So let's go ahead and edit this file. So right click, let's right click, edit with Notepad++, and here we go. Here we have this default Vagrant file. Now I'm going to be copying and pasting the whole Vagrant file from my blog post, which you can get the link in the description, and that's basically everything in here with this. So this has comments and it explains what the code means. So this means that we're going to set up all virtual machines by default with Ubuntu Trusty 32, and this will allow us to forward the SSH connections automatically with port 22 to our local host, which will allow us to connect to our virtual servers. And here's where we actually define Web1 and what it's going to be. So we're going to give it a host name of Web1, and this is going to allow access to our virtual machine from our host machine. So we're going to be able to access port 80 from port 884 on our local host. So if you go ahead and type in 127.0.0.1 127.0.0.1:8884, it's going to be redirected to the virtual machine at port 80. So this is just to test, if the website is actually working with Nginx, and you can probably take it out once you actually start using it on your real servers. Or, well, this is development, so you might not have to do that. So this sets the IP for the private network with the other servers. So we're going to give it a IP address of 192.168.50.4, and we're going to give it the internal network of Internet. So once you've got this in your Vagrant file, go ahead and save. And let's go back in our command prompt and let's go Vagrant, and then let's go Vagrant up, which starts up the VM, and let's go Web1. So let's click enter. And the first time around, it should take some time because it actually has to get the operating system loaded and everything, so just give it some time. Also, while it's booting up, you can see which ports are forwarded. So port 80 is forwarded to localhost at port 8884, and port 22, which is for SSH, is forwarded to 2222. And this port will change, and so will this for every server that we're going to make. Alright, so once your server has completed booting up, you should get something like this. First time it should say maybe that Vagrant has found an insecure key, and it'll automatically generate a new key pair for the security. And to SSH into this, we can go Vagrant, SSH, and our host name for the server, which is Web1. And let's go ahead and click enter. Alright, once you see this, we have connected via SSH, and we are ready to start setting up our first web server. So whenever you start up your first VM, you want to update your package list. So sudo apt-get let's update, and this will get the latest packages, or the package list information. Once this is completed, we can go ahead and again sudo apt-get let's install PHP5 FPM, PHP5 MySQL, PHP5 GD, and let's also GD, there we go, and let's also install Nginx. Yes. Now to configure PHP, let's go ahead and sudo nano into the etc php5 fpm /php.ini. Now in this file you want to find, you can use Control W, and you want to find cgi.fix_path. And if you enter that, you can see right here that we want to change this setting to 0. So it'll be initially commented out, so you want to uncomment it and change this value to 0, because this is a security risk, since what this basically does is it tries to guess and loads the file with the closest name that you type in, even if you didn't type it in correctly. So we want to turn that off, so only if you type in the correct name of a file will you be able to get access to it. So to save, let's go ahead and go Control X, yes, and then click Enter to save it to that file. And next, let's go ahead and edit php5 fpm/pool.d/www.conf. And in here, you want to scroll down, and under the listen variable right here, you want to make sure that this is set to /var/run/php5-fpm.sock. This is the Unix domain socket which we have set the listen to, and once you have done this, or if it's already like this, as in my case, you can just go ahead and exit out, and we're done with that file. Now once you've done these two things, you can go ahead and restart the PHP5 server, so sudo service php5 fpm restart, and this will restart that process. Now to configure Nginx, let's go ahead and copy the sites available configuration file. So this is sudo copy the etc Nginx sites available, and there will be a default file here. We want to copy that to Nginx sites available, and let's name this Drupal. So once that's loaded, let's go ahead and nano into this. So etc Nginx sites available Drupal, and this should be what the default Nginx configuration should look like. There are a few things we need to do here. So first, let's go ahead and we want to listen to port 80. So we can just take out this default server here and just make it listen to port 80. Also, you want to comment out this listen line, because this is actually for IPv6 and we only want IPv4. And the root, this is where we're going to keep our Drupal files. So what we want to do here is let's store our Drupal site files in var/www/Drupal, and that's where we want to keep our Drupal files, or where it's going to be located. And under index, this basically says what files to look at first whenever that directory is accessed via the web server. And originally, it's going to, by default, look for HTML and HTML files. But before this, since Drupal runs on PHP, we want to make it look for index.php. So go ahead and add that in there. And next, you should also have this location, and you should have it try for files, or else display a 404 error. And also go ahead and uncomment this error 404, error page 404. And next, let's uncomment these 500 errors and the location it should go to for those. And now let's go all the way over here, and we want to uncomment this whole block basically. So let's do that. And since we are actually using PHP5 FPM, we can go ahead and comment out this line for PHP5 CGI only. So let's comment this out right here. And above on this line, let's go ahead and add the line try files with URI and equals 404 semicolon. And once you're done with that, whoops, URI, there we go, try files URI. Once you're done with that, you can go ahead and Control X, save, yes, and now we're done with that. So now there's one more thing that we need to do. Since we're done with this, we want to remove the file from, because there in Nginx there are sites available and sites enabled. So let's go ahead and in the enabled, let's remove the default site. and we want to create a symbolic link from the sites available from our Drupal configuration file to the sites enabled folder. Alright, so there we go. Now once we're done with this, we can in the end restart our Nginx service, so sudo service Nginx restart, and that will restart Nginx. So now it's time to get the latest version of Drupal. You can go ahead and get git and git clone the repository, or you can go ahead and download Drupal 8.0.0 beta 4, which is what I'm going to do. So right now I'm in my home directory. So let's go ahead and wget http://ftp.drupal.org/files/projects/Drupal 8.0.0 beta 4.tar.gz, and this will download the file. Now to extract this, let's go ahead and go tar xzvf to extract, and let's type in Drupal. There we go, and let's click enter, and this should extract all the files. Now let's go ahead and make our root directory that we said in Nginx, in the Nginx configuration file. So in this case that was var www.drupal, so let's sudo make directory, include parents, and /var/www/drupal, and that will create that file. Now what you want to do is go ahead sudo, and let's copy recursively everything in the Drupal directory to var/www/drupal, and let's let that copy. Once that's done copying, we want to set our permissions. So let's sudo chown or chown recursively. Let's set the owner as vagrant, and let's set the user to www.data, which is the user of Nginx when it's accessing the web files, to var www/drupal, so our root directory for Drupal. And then let's also sudo usermod, and let's add group www.data to our user, which is vagrant. So that's the current user I'm using right now. As you can see right here, we are on vagrant, so let's go ahead and add our user to the www.data group, and then let's sudo chmod recursively group. We want to add read-write permissions to all files in var/www/drupal. And okay, so now we're done doing this. So if we want to go ahead and test it out, you can go to, let's go to our Chrome that we had open, and since we're port forwarding and we have the port set to 8884, let's go ahead and go to 127.0.0.1:8884, and this should take us to the Drupal installation file. And there we go. This is loading, and you can see the title, so that's the first clue that it's working, and it shows a loading sign. And there we go, here we go. Here we have the installation page. So now that we know that this is working, we can go ahead and now move on to setting up our second web server. If this isn't working, try following the steps again, or that you can look at the troubleshooting section down in the blog post. So let's open up our command prompt and exit out of this SSH connection. And now there are two ways you can go about installing Web Server 2. First, you can either do everything we just did in setting up web server 1, or if you want to do it the quick way, you can package everything we have in web server 1 right now and create a second virtual machine from our web 1 virtual machine. So I'll be doing the second option there to create a package of this virtual machine and load that up in our second web 2 machine. So to do that, first we need to halt our web 1 machine. So let's vagrant halt web 1. So once this has stopped, we can go ahead and type in vagrant package web 1. Now this will package everything and all the contents in web 1 and make a .box file out of it. So go ahead and let's package this. Once it has finished exporting and compressing the package, you can find where its location is at the location or directory it outputted right here, which is my Vagrant environment. So it should probably be in your Vagrant environment directory as well. So let's open up the Explorer to here, and we should see that there is a package.box. So this is everything that we had in our virtual machine right here in this box from web 1. So now let's go ahead and edit our Vagrant file again. And I'm going to be copying this as well from the blog again. So in this one, just a second, we are going to paste this right here. We're going to give this a box name of Drupal Nginx -php. So this will be a custom box name. So this setting will override the default box setting config we set up here, which was Ubuntu Trusty 32. So this will be a custom name. You don't have to name it this. You can name it whatever you want, but just remember that. And the box URL will be the URL in which the package.box was stored. So this is not the URL, but the directory, if I said URL. So the directory right there with the protocol file also, and it will have the host name of web2, and we're going to also forward the port 80, but this time we're going to be forwarding it to our local host at port 8886. And this private network, we're going to give it a IP of 192.168.50.5. The last one was 4, and we're also going to include it in that same network name called intnet. And now let's go ahead and save our Vagrant file. And now I'm going to have 2 command prompts open. So over here, let's go ahead and go vagrant up web 2. Oh, whoops. First, we need to go into our Drupal directory, and now let's run vagrant up web 2. Oh, okay, so I got an error, and this is probably because I copied and pasted right here a username. Forgot to replace this with my username. So go ahead and whatever your username is, it should be stored here. And let's go ahead and save this Vagrant file again. And now let's run that command once more. And there we go. It should be downloading from that location, and it will be installed. So it's basically box adding, Vagrant box add, and now it's going to be adding one called Drupal Nginx PHP. So later on, you can also set up your boxes from this box name. You can also later remove it with Vagrant box remove if you want. Now it's going to start importing that base box after it finishes adding the box. Alright, so once Web 2 has finished booting up, we can go ahead and go vagrant up and start up our Web 1. Okay, so Web 1 is done booting up. Now let's go ahead and vagrant SSH into Web 1. And over here, let's vagrant SSH into Web 2. Alright, so we are connected in both command prompts to our SSH. So let's go ahead and test out if both servers work. So let's minimize these. So let's go ahead and refresh this and see if Web 1 works again. Alright, so it works. Now let's go ahead and try out Web 2, which is basically forwarded to 8886, if you remember, in our vagrant file. Okay, so this one works as well. So remember, do not continue on with the installation, as we still need to set up everything, and at the end we will configure Drupal. So let's open up our terminals again. Let's clear the screens. Now it's time to synchronize both files from Web 1 and Web 2. So there are two ways of doing this. First, you can use a program called Unison, and another is using a script I made implementing inotify-wait and SCP. So let's start with Unison. So let's go ahead and sudo apt get install Unison, and you will want to install this on both servers. apt-get install Unison. Alright, so once this is done, let's just go ahead and run the Unison command, and this will create a .unison directory actually in your home folder. So now we can actually go into that, and here we can see there's a default profile. So what we want to do here is we want to copy this default profile into Drupal.prf, and let's go ahead and edit this Drupal.profile. And here we want to say that root equals /var/www/Drupal. This will synchronize the Drupal folder in Web 1 to the other root, which is going to be through SSH. We're going to be using the user vagrant on Web 2 at, now let's give it the private IP, so 192.168.50.5, and we are going to do the location at var/www/Drupal. Next, we need to say that batch equals true. So this is basically that Unison won't ask you questions if you want to sync files, it'll just sync files. Now you want to type in auto equals true. This will automatically accept default non-conflicting actions from Unison. And we want to set times equal to true, which will synchronize the modification times of the files. And let's set owner to true and group equals to true. So this will synchronize the owner and groups also of the files in our var www/Drupal directory. So let's go ahead and exit out, yes, save. And now to sync both of our files, let's run Unison. So Unison, and we want to use the Drupal profile or preferences. And now you want to say yes, you want to accept this key fingerprint of Web 2. And we need to type in the password. So this is going to be by default vagrant. And the first time you synchronize with Unison, it's going to make an archive of all the files in our root directory. So just wait for that to happen. Alright, so it has completed the first sync, as you can see, waiting for changes from server, reconciling changes, nothing to change, replicas have been changed only in identical ways since last sync. So basically this is saying that both files are in sync. So let's, if we run it again, type in our password. Oops. And there we go, looking for changes, nothing to replicate. So now this only runs the sync once, so how do we repeat sync? We can give it the repeat flag, or we can set it in the preferences or profile. And we can set this to watch. Now this is still experimental, sort of. It hasn't fully implemented, so if this doesn't work, then there's another way. Like it doesn't work for me, so you can also set a time limit. So if you want to repeat Unison every second, go ahead and type 1 and click enter. Again, type in the password. And this will sleep after syncing, it'll sleep for 1 second every time and keep syncing. But now you're locked into the screen. How do you get out? It'll keep syncing and you can't do anything else. Well, this is why there is screen. So if you don't have screen already, you can go ahead and sudo apt get install screen, but I already have it installed, so we can go ahead and just type in screen, and this will create a new screen. Now here we can go ahead and run Unison Drupal repeat 1. So now go ahead and type in our password, and this will keep syncing. And to exit out of this, or not really exit but disconnect, you can click Control-A-D. And you can say that'll disconnect. If you want to see which screen is running, you can go ahead and type screen list, and this will show you the screens running. If you want to reconnect to a screen, you can go screen and give it the R flag. And if you only have one screen running, that will be automatically reattached to. But if you have multiple screens, then you want to type in reattach and type in the first few digits of the identifier, so 2126. And that will take you to the screen. So now that these files are in sync, everything in /var/ww/Drupal will be synced. So let's go ahead and see if this works. We have our files here, and let's go ahead and let's nano hi.php. Hi. Let's go ahead and save this, and this actually won't happen, but just to test to see if it's working, you can see that it has sent the hi file over. Now this sync from Unison is actually bidirectional, so it's not just from web 1 to web 2, but actually from web 1 to web 2 and web 2 to web 1. So if we delete the file hi over here, so let's remove hi.php, it should be removed here as well. So there we go. If you don't want to use Unison, you can use a script I wrote in Bash which implements inotify-wait and scp. So here's the script. It has a few variables you can set, and it uses scp to transfer files and just simple ssh to remove files. So one benefit of this is that it will only sync whenever a file is changed, created, or removed, so it won't be as hardware intensive. But one down point is it's only unidirectional, so it can only notice changes on the server it's running on. So you need to run it on both servers. So let's go ahead and set this up. So open up FileZilla, and I have created a new site here, or any FTP client, or SFTP actually, since we do not have the FTP port forwarded. We need to use the SFTP method, and we will be connecting to port 2200. Which is the port forwarded port on our local host, which goes to port 22 on web 1. User vagrant, password vagrant, and let's go ahead and connect. Yes, let's trust to this host. And let's find the Drupal sync right here. There we go, there it is. Let's send that over. And now there it is. Now we're done with FileZilla, so let's close out of that. Or minimize. And now what we need to do here is we need to sudo apt get install inotify-tools. this will contain the inotify-wait command we will use in the script. Let's install inotify-tools. Okay, so once installed, we can see that Drupal sync is here. But if you try to run it, it won't run because we do not have permissions to execute this file, as you can see here. So we need to chmod and add execution to Drupal_sync. So now, there we have it. We can go ahead and try it out. As you can see, Drupal_sync, and you can use it, you can start it. So let's go ahead and actually check the status. So it's not running. We can start it. Watch is established, and you can see that you're not really out of the script, but if you press enter, you'll get back to your line and you can type in whatever commands you want. And now if you go ahead and check the status, you can see that it is running. So let's actually go ahead and stop it right now. And the process was killed, so if you check the status, it is not running. So it works. Now what we need to do is actually copy this over to Web 2. So let's go ahead and do that. To do this, let's actually use SCP, secure copy, and let's transfer the Drupal_sync to Vagrant at 192.168.50.5 :home/Drupal_sync. Click enter, type in Vagrant password, which is Vagrant, and it should be transferred. So if we go ahead and list what we have here, you can see that Drupal sync has transferred and the permissions are there to execute it. So now what we need to do is edit this Drupal sync file, because this Drupal sync is originally transferred to have the remote host as 192.168.50.5, which is the private address of Web 2. But we need to actually change it over here so that it will be connecting to Web 1. So let's nano into Drupal_sync, and let's go ahead and change this. You can also change the sync directory, but it's what we have right now, so it's var/www/Drupal, and you can also find this script on my blog. So we need to change this to 192.168.50.4, which is the private IP of Web 1, and let's save this file. And now we can run this sync, and we can start it. There we go, watch is established, and now if we check status, there we go, it is running. But let's actually stop this. Now, one problem that can come up is that every time a file is changed, it will ask you for a password, because if we try to SSH into Vagrant at 192.168.50.4 or the other server, it'll always ask for the password. But we want it to automatically connect. So how can we do this? We need to generate a pair of SSH keys. So let's do this. So let's go SSH keygen. Let's make it a type of RSA. Click enter, and we don't want to give it a name. File to which save with no file, just click enter, no passphrase, enter, and there we go. We have generated a key. So where we can find this at home/.ssh, and if you list, you can see that there's an ID_RSA and ID_RSA.pub, which is the public key. So what we want to do is actually run the concatenate command. So cat ID_RSA.pub, and pipe this into SSH Vagrant at 192.168.50.5, and we want to run the command cat again, and into .ssh/authorized_keys. So this will add our public key to the authorized key sections. Now we need to type in the password one last time, and there we go. Once you're able to type in another command, it should be finished. So now if we try to SSH into Vagrant at 192.168.50.5, it should automatically connect. There we go. So let's go ahead and exit out of this. And now we need to do the same thing from Web 2 to Web 1. So let's go ahead and generate another pair of keys over here. Keygen, type of RSA, enter, 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 cd.ssh. Okay, we see that the public key is here, so let's get that. RSA.pub, pipe it into SSH Vagrant at 192.168.50.4, which is the private IP of web 1, and let's run the command cat into .ssh/authorized_keys. Run that command, type in the password for the last time, and now let's try this out. Vagrant at 192.168.50.4, enter, and we're connected. Great. So now we can automatically SSH without having to type in the password. So now we can go ahead and start our Drupal sync. So let's do that. Drupal_sync start. Watch is established. Enter. Okay, we're out, but it is still running. So let's start it over here on web 1. Drupal_sync start. Watch is established. Enter. Okay, so there we go. Once you have your sync of choice ready and working on both servers, it's time to set up the database server. So let's go ahead and edit our Vagrant file. And in this, we want to define a new server for database. Now you can get this on the blog. Again, I'll be copying and pasting. Let's add it to the end of here. And there we go. This defines the database virtual machine. It will just have a host name of database, a private network IP of 192.168.50.6, and it will use the internal network of Internet. So it's a pretty short configuration. And now let's go ahead and save this, and let's open up another command prompt, and let's go into Documents, Vagrant, Drupal, and let's Vagrant up on DB. Enter, and let's wait for this to set up. So once the database server has booted up, we can go ahead and go Vagrant SSH into database. Okay, so once you've entered in the SSH screen, we can go ahead and let's update our packages list. Once this is done, we can go sudo apt-get install, and let's install MySQL server. Yes. And now it'll prompt you for a root password for your MySQL user. So make this secure. For right now, as an example, I'll just be typing in password, but you should probably make a really secure password for this, as this has all the privileges in your MySQL database. So repeat the password, and that should set your root password. Okay, so once this is done, we need to run the actual installation. So it's sudo mysql_install_db, and this will run the installation. Okay, so once this is done, we need to actually run the MySQL secure installation. So this will secure up our server a bit, since it originally comes with many test stuff in the database, like a test user and stuff like that. So installation, enter current password for root, so let's go ahead and enter that. Change the root password, no, because we just set it. Remove anonymous users. See this one, you want to remove anonymous users. You want to disallow root login remotely, yes. Remove test database and access to it, yep. Reload privileges tables, no, yes. And there we go. Now it's our database will be a little bit more secure. So now to configure MySQL, let's go ahead and sudo nano into /etc/mysql/ my.conf. Whoops, CNF. There we go. Okay, so here you want to change the bind address. So go ahead and find that bind address. So it's right here. And here we need to change localhost to our private IP address, which we set as 192.168.50.6 for the database server. Now once you're done with this, save this file, yes, enter, and now let's sudo service MySQL restart. And that should restart the MySQL server. So now what you need to do is MySQL user root, login as root with the password. Go ahead and type in your root password, and now we are in MySQL. So here we need to create our Drupal database. So let's create database Drupal with character set as UTF-8 and col 8 as UTF-8 underscore general underscore CI semicolon. Again, you can find this in the blog post. Okay, so it has created the database. Now what we need to do is create our users. So we need to create a user for each remote host that we are going to allow. So web 1 and web 2. So let's create user, and we're going to name this user Drupal underscore user at, now here you need to type in the IP address, private 192.168.50.4, which is of web 1, and identified by, and here we need to type in our password. So I'm just going to make them password, however, you should make them more secure, as this is the user that's going to be allowed access to your Drupal database. So click enter. Okay, that user's been created. Now you want to also create this for web 2 or the other server. So we're going to change that to 5 and enter, and that was created. Now next we need to grant permissions to these users to the Drupal database. So to do this, let's grant select insert update delete create drop index alter create temporary tables on Drupal dot asterisk to Drupal underscore user at 192.168.50.4. Now let's go ahead and enter that command, and that it should grant those privileges to that user. And we need to do this same thing to our web 2. Okay, great. So now we need to flush the privileges as we just changed them. So let's flush privileges. Okay, great. Now we can exit out of this MySQL command line. And now we are completely done setting up our MySQL database. And from here on out, it will be running. So let's go ahead and just clear the screen, and it should be running. Now the only server left to set up is the balancer. the last server to set up the load balancer. So let's go ahead and set this up. First, let's add the configuration in the Vagrant file. And this configuration will be a little bit different because we will actually give this a public IP address. So here's the config, which you can find in the blog post again, named balancer. We will give it a hostname of balancer, and we will port forward guest 80 to 9090. So this is just a private IP, and we will also give it a public network. Now we haven't defined the actual IP address we're going to be giving because it will automatically give us an IP address. So it'll also have a private IP of 192.168.50.7 in the internal network instnet. So let's save this configuration. Let's open up a new command prompt. And let's go ahead into Documents, Vagrant, Drupal, and Vagrant up balancer. Okay, so now it tells us which network we want to bridge to, and you can go ahead and pick one. I'm going to go with my Wi-Fi adapter, which is 1, and let's continue. And you can also notice that there is now a adapter 2, which is bridged, and that will be our public network that we're connected to. Okay, so once your server is finished booting up the balancer server, let's go ahead and SSH into balancer. Once you're here, let's sudo apt get update to update our package list. Once this is done, let's sudo apt get install HAProxy. Now, if you want HAProxy to start on every boot of your virtual machine or your server, you're going to have to edit the etc/default/HAProxy file. Here you need to change enabled to 1, and that's it. Exit out, save. And we're ready to go to the next configuration of HAProxy, which is sudo nano into etc/HAProxy/HAProxy.cfg. Here, under defaults, we need to change the mode to TCP and the option to TCP log to tell HAProxy that we're going to be setting up a layer 4 load balancing setup. Layer 4 is what we're doing currently. There's also a layer 7 type of load balancing, which includes different applications. Once you've done that, we need to add our front end. We need to define our front end. So let's say front end. We're going to name it www. And we are going to bind the address to one thing we need to do is get our public IP. So go ahead and save this for right now. And to get your public IP, go ahead and type in ifconfig. Over here in your second one, you should see what IP address your network gave you. So my Wi-Fi adapter gave me the address of 192.168 192.1.112. So this is the public IP address that you can address in your browser. So you don't have to go to one localhost colon 8886 or 8884 or something like that. All you need to do is type that in and it will load the site. So we need to enter that address into this config right here. So let's bind, I believe it was 192.168.1.112 colon 80. So it will listen at it will bind the port 80, and the default underscore backend, we will just name that Drupal -hyphen backend. And next we need to define this backend. So backend, we'll have a backend named Drupal -backend, and we will balance this with the algorithm of round robin. So round robin algorithm is every person that connects, it'll keep switching between the servers. Now there are more algorithms such as least connection. So least connection, it will send that user to the server, to the web server with the least amount of connections. Another is source. This will hash the source IP address to ensure that they will always connect to the same server again and again if you have server-specific files stored in that server. You can also find a list of more algorithms on the blog post in the description below. For this example, we're going to be using round robin. Next, you want to say that this mode is going to be in TCP. And now to define our servers, we're going to say server web server 1. Now this is just a name, so it can be anything. Next, we're going to say the private IP address, so 192.168.50.4, port 80, and we want to include check. I'll explain a little bit later. Server web server 2 at 192.168.50.5 colon 80, port 80 check. So what the check basically does is checks the health of that server. So if it checks and that server is down, it'll automatically go to the other servers. So for example, if web server 1 shut down, it'll forward all the requests to web server 2. So once you're done with that, we can save this and exit out. Now let's enable logging so we can actually check if they are being sent to different servers. So to do this, go ahead sudo nano into etc/r/syslog.conf, and here go down until you see $modload imudp, so right here, and uncomment these out and add this one line below here, udp server address 127.0.0.1. Once you're done with this, go ahead and exit out, save, and let's restart SUSE services. Sudo service rsyslog restart, and let's also restart HAProxy. Done. Now it is finally time to test out if our web server works. So let's go ahead and minimize this, and let's go ahead and go to our public IP address, 192.168.1.112, and let's enter this. Awesome, the Drupal install page has loaded, so that's a great sign that it's working. So now let's click and save and continue. Now let's select an installation profile, standard, save and continue. And you can see that you think that all requests are going to 192.168.1.112 and they're coming from here, but in fact, it's actually not. So you might get these errors that settings file does not exist and services file does not exist. So we need to copy these from the default. So to do this, go back to web 1 and let's go ahead and cd into sites/default. And if you list, you can see that there are default.services.yml and default.settings.php. So you need to go ahead and copy these. So let's copy default.services.yml into services.yml, and let's do the same for settings. Settings.php, settings.php, enter, and then now we should have those. So now let's refresh this page. Now you might get the error that they are not writable. So we need to add writing permissions to these. So let's go ahead into web 1 again. And if we go ahead and list the permissions, you can see that they are not writable. So to actually add the writing permissions, they do have writing permissions on the group, but the group is not set to www.data. So let's go ahead and chown, chown, vagrant, www.data to services.yml and settings.php. Okay, let's go ahead and list them again, and there you can see that www.data has been set as the group. And if you check web 2, let's go ahead into sites/default, and let's list. You should see that these have been synced. So if we go ahead and check the permissions, the permissions have also been synced. So now let's go ahead and give this one more refresh, and it should take us to the next page. Okay, great. So as you can see, this is automatically selected. MySQL. Database name, we gave this Drupal. Database username, we made this Drupal_user. And the database password, we identified this user by just password, although you should have gave a more secure password. Advanced options, this host is not going to be localhost anymore as default you might have used on any other web server. This will be the private IP of the database server. So this is 192.168.50.6. I have it right here. And there we go. Port number, this should be default unless you changed it, which we didn't in this case. So now the thing we need to do is just click Save and Continue. Now this should start installing Drupal. So let it go ahead and do that. Okay, so it has finished installing all the modules. Now you do get this message that all necessary changes to sites default and settings.php have been made, so you should remove write permissions now. So let's go ahead and take this suggestion and do that. So what we need to do here is sudo chmod, or we might not have to use sudo, so let's just chmod, and let's group subtract write permissions from settings.php, and let's take away write permissions on services.yml. And that should be it. Since we took away those permissions, only Vagrant, us, can write to it, and www.data can't. So let's go ahead and give this a site name of load balancing, or load balanced, since it's already load balanced. I'll just give this a email address of admin@example, username @Akshay, passed, just passed, although you should make that stronger, and let's just save and continue. There you go. Awesome. Congratulations, you now have installed Drupal on a load balanced setup using 4 different servers, 1 balancer, 2 web servers, and a database. So this works. But just before we're done, we need to see if it's actually working. So let's go ahead and take a look at the logs that we set up earlier in HAProxy. So to do this, let's go ahead and sudo nano into var/log/HAProxy.log. And here you go, you can see all the requests that have been done. And if you go a little bit to the right, you can see which web server it's sent to. So this one was web server 1, this one web server 1. Okay, so 2 of the same, but there we go, web server 2, web server 2, web server 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2. As you can see, it keeps most of the time alternating, so we do see that it is working. So that's awesome. So let's see if the check actually works, and if one server goes down, if both servers, if the website will keep running through only one server. So let's actually shut down web 2. So let's exit out of this, and let's vagrant halt web 2. Alright, so web 2 has shut down, and let's give this load balancing a little refresh. And let's see if it works. Since, there we go, we don't have one server, so the other server is taking all the load. And if we keep refreshing, see, it never goes offline. It's still working. That's awesome, but let's check the logs really quickly and make sure again. Let's scroll down all the bottom, and you can see that server Drupal backend web 2 is down. So connection is refused. And there we go. So even if you keep refreshing at this IP address, it'll keep using web 1 to load the website. And there we go, guys. It's been a long time. We set up a lot of things. I hope you guys learned something on how to load balance servers and run Drupal, and hopefully this can help you set up your own Drupal website or any website on a load balanced setup. Thanks.